The Vorthan Empire had conquered 4,000 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their method was simple and had worked for 10,000 years. They would arrive with their massive fleet, demonstrate their power by destroying a moon or a small city, and then offer terms of surrender. Every species they had ever met chose the same path. They surrendered, became part of the empire, and provided resources and soldiers for the next conquest. Grand Admiral Kexrath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the blue and green planet grow larger on his viewing screen. His 4 eyes studied the world with the calm look of a predator who already knew the outcome of the hunt. "Report," he said, his deep voice echoing through the massive bridge. "The 3rd planet of this system, Admiral," said his science officer. "Population of approximately 8 billion, primitive technology. They have only recently discovered faster-than-light communication, which is how we detected them. No significant space presence. No defensive capabilities that could threaten even a single scout ship." Kexrath's mandibles clicked in what his species called amusement. "Another easy conquest. How many is this for me? 63 worlds." 64, Admiral, his aide corrected. "Send the standard message. Offer them the usual terms." The communications officer worked at his station. The Vorthan translation systems were the most advanced in the galaxy. They could learn any language within minutes of hearing it. They had been monitoring the broadcasts from this world, which the natives called Earth, for several cycles now. "Message sent, Admiral. We have informed them that the Vorthan Empire claims this world. They have 1 rotation of their planet to surrender. If they do not, we will demonstrate our power." Kexrath nodded and settled back in his command chair. This part was always boring. No species had ever refused the initial offer, though some took time to argue among themselves about how to respond. He expected the humans would be the same. But the response that came back was not what he expected. "Admiral," the communications officer said, his voice confused, "we are receiving multiple transmissions from the planet. They are not unified. Different groups are sending different messages." "That is normal. Primitive worlds rarely have a single government. What do they say?" The officer was quiet for a long moment. "Admiral, I am having difficulty summarizing. The messages are contradictory. Some are asking for clarification. Some are offering negotiation. But many of them," he paused, "many of them appear to be refusing." Kexrath's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among his kind. "Refusing? That is not possible. They have seen our fleet. They know they cannot resist." "I am transmitting one of the messages to your personal screen now, Admiral." Kexrath looked down at the text that appeared before him. It was from something called the United Nations Security Council, which seemed to be a gathering of leaders from multiple nations. "To the Vorthan Empire," the message read, "we have received your demand for surrender. We wish to inform you that Earth does not surrender. We do not know if we can defeat you. We suspect we cannot, but we will fight. Every nation, every city, every village, every person who can hold a weapon will fight. You may destroy us, but you will not conquer us. If you want this planet, you will have to kill every last one of us to take it." Kexrath read the message 3 times. Then he called for his tactical officer. "Commander, scan their military capabilities again. Tell me what you see." The tactical officer, a young Vorthan named Threx, worked at his station for several minutes. "Admiral, their military technology is primitive. Chemical propellant weapons, nuclear devices of limited power. Their aircraft cannot reach orbital altitude. Their naval vessels are confined to their oceans. They have no space-based weapons at all." "And yet they refuse to surrender," Kexrath said slowly. "Perhaps they do not understand the situation," Threx suggested. "Perhaps they think they can fight us." "No," Kexrath said. "Read the message again. They say they suspect they cannot defeat us. They know they will lose, and they refuse anyway." The bridge was quiet. This had never happened before. In 10,000 years of conquest, no species had ever looked at the Vorthan fleet and said no. Perhaps it is a bluff, the communications officer suggested. Perhaps they hope we will leave if they seem difficult. Scan their planet, Kexrath ordered. Look at their military movements. Threx worked at his station, his claws clicking on the controls. When he looked up, his expression was strange. Admiral, they are mobilizing, all of them. Every nation on the planet is activating their military forces. They are moving civilians into underground shelters. They are positioning weapons. They are, he paused, checking his readings again. Admiral, they are preparing to fight. Kexrath stood up and walked closer to the viewing screen. The blue planet hung in space, looking peaceful and beautiful. But according to his sensors, the entire world was preparing for war. Gather the senior officers, he said. We need to discuss this. In the conference room, Kexrath stood at the head of the table and looked at his commanders. These were experienced officers, veterans of dozens of conquests. They had seen every trick, every negotiation tactic, every last-minute plea for mercy. But none of them had ever seen this. The situation is unprecedented, Kexrath began. The humans have refused to surrender. They are actively preparing to resist our invasion. Then we destroy them, said Admiral Vorn, commander of the 2nd Fleet Division. It will take longer, but the outcome is the same. We have done this before. Have we? Kexrath asked. When? Vorn opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He searched his memory. The Kelix of Sector 7 resisted for. No, they surrendered after we destroyed their capital city. The Thren held out for. No, they also surrendered after we demonstrated our power. Every species we have conquered surrendered at some point, Kexrath said. Some quickly, some after much destruction, but they all surrendered. The question is, what do we do with a species that will not surrender at all? We kill them all, Vorn said simply. That is the alternative to surrender. Is it? Kexrath activated the display on the table. I have been studying these humans. They are a violent species. They have been fighting wars among themselves for their entire history. They have a concept they call total war, where every resource of a society is dedicated to fighting. They have another concept they call guerrilla warfare, where small groups fight against larger forces using ambush and sabotage. And they have many stories about resistance fighters who continue to fight even when their nations have been conquered. Stories are not battles, Vorn said. Their history is full of examples, Kexrath continued. Invasions that succeeded militarily but failed completely because the conquered people never stopped fighting. Occupations that lasted years or decades before the conquerors gave up and left. They have a saying, you can kill us, but you cannot conquer us. Then we kill them, Vorn repeated. What is the problem? We have the power to destroy every living thing on that planet. The problem, Kexrath said slowly, is that a dead world gives us nothing. We do not conquer worlds to destroy them. We conquer worlds for their resources, their populations, their productivity. A world of corpses is worthless. The room was quiet as the officers considered this. Then we conquer them piece by piece, Vorn suggested. We land forces, establish control, and expand our territory gradually. Kexrath pulled up more data on the display. 8 billion humans. They live on every part of their world, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts to dense jungles. Our entire ground force numbers 300 million. Even if we could land them all, even if we suffered no casualties, we would be outnumbered more than 20 to 1. Our technology, Vorn began. Technology wins battles, Kexrath interrupted. It does not win occupations. Every soldier we land on that planet will need to be supplied, protected, and supported. Every city we capture will need to be garrisoned. Every road, every building, every piece of infrastructure will need to be guarded against sabotage. The humans have 8 billion potential resistance fighters. How many soldiers would we need to control them all? No one answered. I have run the calculations, Kexrath said. Even with the most optimistic assumptions, occupying this world would require more soldiers than the Empire possesses, and that assumes the humans do not actively resist. If they fight us at every turn, if they destroy their own resources rather than let us have them, if they refuse to work for us, refuse to feed us, refuse to do anything except fight and die, we would spend more conquering this one world than we would ever gain from it. Then what do you suggest? Vorn asked, his voice frustrated. That we simply leave, that we allow a primitive species to defy the Empire. Kexrath was quiet for a long moment. I suggest we learn more before we decide anything. These humans are strange. They may be primitive, but they think in ways we do not understand. I want to talk to them. The humans were surprised when the Vorthan flagship sent a new message. Not a demand, a request. We wish to speak with your leaders, the message said, not to negotiate surrender, to understand. After much debate, the United Nations agreed. A secure video link was established between the Eternal Dominion and the UN General Assembly in New York. Grand Admiral Kexrath would speak to the gathered representatives of humanity. Kexrath looked at the screen and saw the assembly hall filled with hundreds of humans. They were smaller than Vorthans, soft-looking, with only 2 eyes and no natural weapons that he could see. And yet these fragile creatures had defied his fleet. I am Grand Admiral Kexrath of the Vorthan Empire, he said through the translator. I have conquered 64 worlds. No species has ever refused to surrender to me. You are the first. I wish to understand why. A human female stood to speak. According to his briefing, she was the Secretary General of this United Nations. We are grateful for this opportunity to communicate, she said. We do not wish for war, but we cannot surrender our world to foreign rule. Cannot, Kexrath asked, or will not? Both, the woman replied. We will not surrender because we believe freedom is worth dying for. And we cannot surrender because even if our government signed a document, our people would not honor it. You might destroy our armies, but you would never control our people. Explain this to me, Kexrath said. On every world we have conquered, the people accept defeat when their governments surrender. They become productive members of the empire. They work, they trade, they live their lives under our rule. Why would your people be different? The Secretary General looked at the other delegates before answering. Because we have never been conquered, not truly. In our history there have been many empires. They have conquered lands and peoples, but every empire has fallen. Every occupation has ended. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes generations. But the conquered always outlast the conquerors. The Vorthan Empire has lasted 10,000 years, Kexrath said. And how many of those conquered worlds are truly loyal to you? The Secretary General asked. How many of them would fight for you if they had a choice? How many of them are simply waiting for the empire to weaken so they can reclaim their freedom? Kexrath did not answer. He was thinking of the rebellions that had plagued certain sectors, the resistance movements that had to be put down generation after generation. The resources spent maintaining order on worlds that had been part of the empire for thousands of years. You see, the Secretary General continued, you have conquered worlds, but you have not changed hearts. Your subjects obey because they must, not because they want to. Humans are the same. We can be ruled by force, but we can never be truly conquered. The moment your grip weakens, we will rise against you. The moment you turn away, we will strike at your back. You will never be able to trust us, never be able to rely on us, never be able to stop watching us. We will be a cancer in your empire, spreading resistance wherever you send us. We could simply destroy you, Kexrath said. Yes, the Secretary General agreed. You could, but you won't. Why do you believe that? Because you are talking to us right now. If you were willing to destroy us, you would have done it already. You want something from us. Resources, labor, soldiers, something you cannot get from a dead world. And we are telling you that you will never get it. Not through conquest. Not through force. The only way you will ever have what we can offer is if we choose to give it." Kexrath was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, thoughtful. "In 10,000 years, no one has ever spoken to me this way. Every species we have met has begged for mercy or bargained for better terms. You are the first to simply say no. Perhaps that is because we are the first species you have met that truly values freedom above survival," the Secretary General said. "We would rather die free than live as slaves. All of us. Every single human being would make that choice." "I find that difficult to believe." "Then talk to us more," the Secretary General said. "Study us, learn about our history, our stories, our values, and then tell me if you still think we can be conquered." Kexrath nodded slowly. "Very well, we will talk, but my fleet remains in orbit. If I decide that conquest is possible, we will act." "We understand," the Secretary General said, "and we will continue preparing to fight." The communication ended. Kexrath sat in his command chair and stared at the blue planet below. For the first time in his long career, he was uncertain. He had conquered 64 worlds, but he was beginning to suspect that this 65th world might be impossible. In the days that followed, the Vorthan fleet remained in orbit while something unprecedented happened. The conquerors and the would-be conquered began to talk. Kexrath requested access to human historical records, and the humans provided them freely. He spent hours reading about the wars of Earth, the empires that had risen and fallen, the resistance movements that had defied impossible odds. He read about small nations that had fought vast empires to a standstill. He read about guerrilla fighters who had driven out occupying armies. He read about underground resistance movements that had operated for years behind enemy lines. And he began to understand. The Vorthan Empire had always assumed that surrender was inevitable, that once a species recognized it was defeated, it would accept that defeat and move on. But humans did not work that way. For humans, defeat was never final. As long as one human remained alive, the fight continued. Kexrath called another meeting of his senior officers. "I have studied the humans," he said, "and I have reached a conclusion. They cannot be conquered, not by us, not by anyone." "That is ridiculous," Admiral Vorn said. "They are primitive, weak." "They are also insane," Kexrath replied. "By our standards, at least. They truly believe that death is preferable to surrender, not just their warriors, their farmers, their teachers, their children. Every single one of them would rather die fighting than live under our rule." "Then let them die," Vorn said. "And then what? We claim a dead world. We spend resources holding territory that gives us nothing. We tie down our military protecting supply lines from ghosts who refuse to stay dead." Kexrath shook his head. "No, the humans have taught me something. There is a species that cannot be conquered. We have finally found them, and the only intelligent response is to leave them alone." "The High Council will not accept this," Vorn warned. "The Empire has never retreated from a conquest." "Then I will convince the High Council," Kexrath said. "I will show them what I have learned, and I will make them understand that some battles are not worth fighting." The message came to Earth 3 days later. "People of Earth," it said, "the Vorthan Empire has decided not to claim your world. You have taught us something that no other species has ever taught us, that there are limits to conquest. Some people cannot be ruled. Some worlds cannot be taken. You are such a people and Earth is such a world. We will leave your system. We will not return, but we would like to make a proposal. Instead of conquerors and conquered, perhaps we can be something else. Perhaps we can be partners. If you are interested, we await your response." The world was stunned. The invasion that everyone had prepared to die resisting would not happen. The aliens were leaving, and they wanted to talk about friendship. In the United Nations, the debate raged for hours. Some wanted to reject any contact with the Vorthans. They had come as conquerors. How could they be trusted as partners? But others pointed out the opportunity. The Vorthan Empire spanned thousands of worlds. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity had achieved. If they were willing to share instead of conquer, humanity could advance by centuries in a single generation. In the end, the Secretary General sent the reply. To the Vorthan Empire, we accept your proposal. Let us talk as equals. Let us learn from each other. And let us show the galaxy that there is a better way than conquest. On the Eternal Dominion, Kexrath read the message and felt something he had never felt before. Respect for an enemy. Admiration for a species that had defeated him without firing a single shot. The humans had not won through strength. They had won through will, through the simple, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And as he ordered his fleet to withdraw, Kexrath knew that the galaxy would never be the same, because word would spread. Other conquered worlds would hear about the species that had said no, and they would begin to wonder, if the humans could defy the Empire, perhaps they could too. The humans had not just saved their own world. They had planted a seed of rebellion that would spread across the stars, and the Vorthan Empire, which had stood for 10,000 years, would never be quite as certain of its power again. 5 years passed. The Vorthan fleet had long since departed Earth's solar system, but the effects of that brief encounter continued to ripple across both human civilization and the galaxy at large. On Earth, the changes were dramatic. The threat of alien invasion had united humanity in ways that centuries of speeches about cooperation had never managed. The old divisions of nation and religion and politics did not disappear, but they seemed smaller now. Humans had looked up at the sky and seen their extinction hovering in orbit, and they had chosen to face it together. That memory did not fade easily. The United Nations had transformed into something more than a debating society. A new organization called the Earth Defense Council now coordinated global military forces. Every nation contributed soldiers, scientists, and resources. The old rivalries between superpowers had not ended, but they had been overshadowed by a larger purpose. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and that changed everything. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the window of her office in the newly constructed Earth Embassy, looking out at the alien city that surrounded her. The Vorthan capital world of Korath Prime was a strange and beautiful place. Towers of crystal and metal rose toward a purple sky. Vehicles that looked like flying insects darted between the buildings, and everywhere she looked, she saw Vorthans going about their daily lives. It still amazed her that she was here. 5 years ago, she had been a mid-level diplomat at the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Then the aliens had arrived, and the world had changed, and somehow she had ended up as humanity's first ambassador to the Vorthan Empire. The door to her office opened, and her aide, Marcus Johnson, entered with a tablet in his hand. "Ambassador, the trade negotiations have concluded. The Vorthans have agreed to our terms." Chen took the tablet and scrolled through the agreement. "They're giving us access to their medical technology." "All of it, including the life extension treatments," Marcus smiled. "The average human lifespan is about to triple." Chen shook her head in wonder. "What did we give them in return?" "Cultural exchanges, mainly. They want more of our entertainment. Apparently, human stories are very popular throughout the Empire. Also, we agreed to share our agricultural techniques. The Vorthans have never developed efficient farming. They always conquered worlds with existing food production." "Of course they did," Chen said. "Why learn to grow food when you can just take it from someone else?" This was the strange truth that humanity had discovered over the past 5 years. The Vorthan Empire was vast and powerful, but it was also hollow. For 10,000 years, the Vorthans had taken what they wanted rather than creating it themselves. Their technology was advanced, but it was mostly stolen or copied from conquered species. Their economy was built on exploitation rather than innovation. Their culture was rigid and unchanging because they had never needed to adapt. Humanity, in contrast, was a species forged by struggle. Everything humans had, they had built themselves. They had invented agriculture because they needed to eat. They had developed medicine because they wanted to live. They had created art and music and stories because something inside them demanded beauty and meaning. And the Vorthons, who had never needed to develop these things, were fascinated by them. "There's something else," Marcus said, his expression becoming more serious. "Grand Admiral Kexrath has requested a meeting with you. He says it's urgent." Chen raised an eyebrow. Kexrath had retired from active military service 2 years ago, but he remained one of the most influential figures in the Empire. He was also, in a strange way, humanity's greatest ally. It was his decision not to invade Earth that had changed everything. "Did he say what he wants to discuss?" "No, but he seemed worried." Chen nodded. "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow." The next day, Chen found herself in Kexrath's private residence, a surprisingly modest home on the outskirts of the capital. The former Grand Admiral received her in his garden, surrounded by plants from a dozen different worlds. "Ambassador Chen," he said, using the human greeting he had learned. "Thank you for coming." "Of course, Admiral. My aide said you had something urgent to discuss." Kexrath's 4 eyes looked tired, Chen noticed. Older. He had aged considerably since their first meeting, though she wasn't sure if that was natural or caused by stress. "I want to talk to you about what is happening in the Empire," Kexrath said, "about what your people have done." Chen felt a flicker of concern. "Have we done something wrong?" "No," Kexrath made a sound that she had learned was the Vorthon equivalent of a bitter laugh. "You have done something very right, and it is destroying everything I once believed in." He gestured for her to sit on a bench carved from some kind of alien stone. When they were both seated, he continued. "Do you remember what you said during our first communication? You said that our conquered worlds were not truly loyal, that they were simply waiting for the Empire to weaken so they could reclaim their freedom." "I remember." "You were right." Kexrath's voice was heavy with something that sounded like grief. "In the 5 years since we left your world, there have been uprisings on 347 planets. Resistance movements that had been dormant for generations have suddenly become active. Entire sectors are demanding independence." Chen kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a complex mix of emotions. She had known this was happening. Earth's intelligence services had been tracking the unrest throughout the Empire, but hearing it from Kexrath himself was different. "And you believe this is because of us?" she asked. "Of course it is because of you." Kexrath turned to look at her directly. "Word spread. It always does. The entire galaxy learned that a primitive species had defied the Vorthon Empire and survived. Not just survived, prospered. And every conquered world began to ask the same question. If the humans could do it, why not us?" "We did not intend to start a rebellion," Chen said carefully. "I know. That is what makes it worse." Kexrath shook his head. "If you had deliberately set out to undermine the Empire, we could have treated you as enemies. We could have justified another attempt at conquest. But you did nothing except refuse to surrender. And that single act of defiance has done more damage to the Empire than 1,000 armies could have done." Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Admiral, may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Is the Empire worth saving?" Kexrath's eyes blinked in sequence, the way they did when he was processing something unexpected. "What do you mean?" "You built your civilization on conquest, on taking from others rather than creating yourselves. You ruled through fear, not loyalty. Now that fear is fading and your subjects are leaving." Chen leaned forward. "Is that really a loss, or is it simply the natural end of something that was never sustainable?" Kexrath was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was very quiet. "I have been a soldier my entire life. I conquered worlds because that is what Vorthons do. It never occurred to me to question whether it was right, whether there might be another way." He looked at the plants surrounding them. "These gardens are my pride. I grew every one of these plants myself. It took decades to learn how to cultivate them. There were many failures, many frustrations, but the success, it felt like something I had earned, something I had created. He turned back to Chen. I never felt that way about my conquests. I was proud of my victories, yes, but it was the pride of a predator who catches his prey, not the pride of a builder who creates something new. It's not too late, Chen said. The empire is changing, whether you like it or not. The question is whether it will collapse into chaos or transform into something better. And what would that something better look like? Chen smiled. That's not for me to say, but perhaps it's time for the Vorthans to start creating instead of conquering, to build partnerships instead of empires, to earn loyalty instead of demanding obedience. Kexrath considered this for a long moment. Then he made the Vorthan sound of resigned agreement. I have spent 5 years studying your species, Ambassador, and I still do not fully understand you. You are violent and peaceful, cruel and kind, selfish and generous, all at the same time. You contain contradictions that should tear you apart, but instead they make you stronger. We are complicated, Chen agreed. That is an understatement. Kexrath stood up, moving slowly with the weight of his years. I called you here because I want to make a request. The High Council is meeting next month to discuss the future of the Empire. There is talk of attempting to reconquer the rebellious worlds, of returning to the old ways. And you want us to intervene. No, I want you to speak. I want you to address the High Council and tell them what you told me 5 years ago, that some people cannot be conquered, that fear is not a foundation for civilization, that there is a better way. Chen stood as well. You think they will listen? I think some of them will, perhaps enough. The old guard is dying, Ambassador. A new generation is rising, one that has grown up with humans as partners rather than enemies. They see what cooperation can achieve. They want more of it. Kexrath's 4 eyes met hers. You changed my mind once. Perhaps you can change theirs. Chen nodded slowly. I will need to consult with my government, but I think we can do this. We did not come to the stars to make enemies, Admiral. We came to find friends. Even among those who tried to conquer you. Especially among them, resentment is easy. Forgiveness is harder, but it builds something that resentment never can. Kexrath made the Vorthan sound of acknowledgement. Your species is very strange, Ambassador Chen. I know, she said. We think the same thing about you. For a moment, the old admiral and the young ambassador looked at each other in perfect understanding. Then, unexpectedly, Kexrath made a sound that Chen had never heard from a Vorthan before. It took her a moment to recognize it. He was laughing. 1 month later, Ambassador Chen Wei stood before the Vorthan High Council in the Great Chamber of Koreth Prime. The chamber was massive, designed to intimidate, towering walls of black stone, a ceiling lost in shadows, row upon row of Vorthan officials looking down at her from elevated seats. She was the smallest being in the room, the weakest, the most vulnerable. And she was not afraid. Distinguished members of the High Council, she began, her voice steady and clear. I come before you not as a representative of a conquered world, but as a representative of a partner. 5 years ago, your fleet orbited my planet. Your Grand Admiral offered us a choice, surrender or die. We chose neither. We chose to fight. And that choice changed everything. She paused, looking around at the assembled Vorthans. Some faces were hostile, some were curious. A few, she thought, were hopeful. I know that many of you believe the Empire should return to its old ways, that the rebellions spreading across your territory can be crushed with sufficient force, that the fear that held your civilization together for 10,000 years can be restored. She shook her head. You are wrong. A murmur went through the chamber. Several council members shifted angrily in their seats. I do not say this to insult you. I say it because it is true. The old ways are over, not because humanity ended them. We are one small species on one small world. They ended because they were always destined to end. Empires built on conquest always fall. Civilizations ruled by fear always crumble. This is not a human truth. It is a universal truth. She stepped forward, her small human form somehow commanding the attention of every being in the vast chamber. But that does not mean the Vorthan civilization must fall. It means it must change. You have knowledge and technology that you have gathered from thousands of worlds. You have resources and capabilities beyond anything my people possess. You have the power to build something that no empire has ever built before. A civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest, partnership instead of domination, creation instead of destruction. She pulled out a small device and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above her, human and Vorthan scientists working together, medical breakthroughs that were saving millions of lives, cultural exchanges that were creating new art forms, trade relationships that were enriching both species. This is what 5 years of partnership has produced. Not war, not resistance, not fear, progress, growth, things that benefit both our peoples. This is the future that is possible, not just between humans and Vorthans, but between the Vorthans and all the species they have ever conquered. The chamber was completely silent now. Chen could feel the weight of thousands of years of tradition pressing against her words. I know this is not easy. Change never is, but the alternative is worse. You can try to reconquer your rebellious worlds. You will spend centuries fighting wars that will drain your resources and kill your people. And in the end, you will lose anyway because you cannot hold what does not wish to be held. Or you can offer your former subjects the same thing you offered us: partnership, freedom, the chance to build something together. She deactivated the display and stood alone before the council, a small human woman facing the rulers of an ancient empire. 5 years ago, Grand Admiral Kexrath asked me why humans would rather die than surrender. I told him it was because we value freedom above survival. But that was only half the answer. The other half is this: we believe that a life without freedom is not really life at all. We believe that every being in the universe deserves the chance to determine their own destiny. And we believe that civilizations which respect this truth are stronger, not weaker, than those which deny it. She took a deep breath. The Vorthan Empire is at a crossroads. One path leads to endless war, declining power, and eventual collapse. The other path leads somewhere new, somewhere no empire has ever gone before. I cannot tell you what you will find there, but I can promise you this: humanity will walk that path with you, as partners, as friends, as equals. She stepped back and bowed slightly in the Vorthan manner. Thank you for listening. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then, from his seat among the retired admirals, Kexrath began to make the Vorthan sound of approval. One by one, other council members joined him. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to pass the vote that would change everything. Enough to begin the transformation of the Vorthan Empire into something new. 10 years after the Vorthan fleet had first appeared in Earth's sky, Ambassador Chen Wei returned home. She stood on a hill overlooking the city of her birth, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. The city had changed in her absence. New buildings reached toward the sky, constructed with materials and techniques learned from a dozen alien species. Flying vehicles darted between the towers, not Vorthan technology, but human designs improved by knowledge shared across the stars. Earth had changed too. The fear of invasion had faded, replaced by something else. Not complacency. Humanity would never forget how close they had come to extinction, but confidence, pride, the knowledge that they had faced the greatest empire in the galaxy and had not flinched. And beyond Earth, the galaxy itself was transforming. The Vorthan Empire was gone. In its place was something called the Interstellar Commonwealth, a voluntary association of thousands of worlds, each governing itself while cooperating with the others. The transition had not been peaceful everywhere. Some Vorthan hardliners had tried to maintain control by force. Some former subject worlds had descended into chaos when their chains were suddenly removed. But slowly, painfully, a new order was emerging. Chen heard footsteps behind her and turned to see a familiar figure approaching. Kexrath moved slowly now, his scales faded to a pale gray, his 4 eyes clouded with age. But he walked without assistance, and his voice was still strong. "It is beautiful," he said, looking at the sunset. "I have seen sunsets on 1,000 worlds, but there is something special about this one." "It's home," Chen said simply. Kexrath nodded. "Yes, that makes a difference." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I came to thank you." "For what?" "For everything, for refusing to surrender, for teaching us that there was another way, for speaking to the High Council when it mattered most." He turned to look at her. "The Vorthan people are learning how to live without conquest. It is difficult. Many of us do not know who we are without an enemy to fight, but we are learning. And we owe that to you, to all humans." Chen shook her head. "You give us too much credit. All we did was say no." "That is precisely what I mean." Kexrath made the Vorthan sound of amusement. "For 10,000 years no one said no to us. We assumed it was because we were powerful. Now I understand that it was because everyone else had forgotten how. Your people never forgot. That is your gift to the galaxy." They stood together in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "What will you do now?" Chen asked. "I am old," Kexrath said. "Too old to fight, too old to command fleets, but not too old to think. I have been writing a history of the Vorthan Empire, not the glorious version we taught our children, but the true version. All the conquests and cruelties, all the suffering we caused. I want future generations to understand what we were so they can choose to be something different." "That sounds important." "It is the most important thing I have ever done." Kexrath's voice was firm despite his age. "More important than any battle I ever won. Conquering worlds changes the present. Telling the truth changes the future." Chen smiled. "You've become quite philosophical in your retirement." "I have had good teachers." Kexrath looked up at the stars. "Out there on 100 worlds, your people are working alongside mine. Scientists and artists, builders and dreamers, all creating things that neither species could have created alone. 1,000 years from now, no one will remember the conquests of the Vorthan Empire, but they will remember this. The time when 2 species who should have been enemies chose to be friends instead." "We're not there yet," Chen cautioned. "There's still distrust, resentment, old wounds that haven't healed." "Of course, that will take generations, but it has begun, and that is what matters." Kexrath turned to face her fully. "I am dying, Ambassador. My doctors tell me I have perhaps another year, but I will die knowing that the universe is better than it was when I was born. That is more than most beings can say." Chen felt tears prick at her eyes. In the years she had known him, Kexrath had transformed from an enemy into an ally, and then into something like a friend. The galaxy would be poorer without him. "You've done more than you know," she said. "When you chose not to invade Earth, you didn't just save one world. You changed the course of history." "No," Kexrath said firmly. "Your people changed history. I simply had the wisdom to step aside." He made the Vorthan sound of respect. "Goodbye, Ambassador Chenwei of Earth. It has been an honor to know your species." "Goodbye, Grand Admiral Kexrath of Vorth. The honor was ours." They stood together as the stars came out. Old enemies turned old friends. Their worlds forever changed by a moment when one species had refused to surrender, and another had been wise enough to listen. 50 years later, a monument was dedicated on the site of the old United Nations building in New York. It was a simple structure, a pillar of crystal from Korath Prime intertwined with granite from Earth, reaching toward the sky. On it were carved words in 100 languages, human and alien alike. The same words appeared on similar monuments on 1,000 worlds throughout the Commonwealth. They read, "Here began the future. When the people of Earth refused to surrender, they taught the galaxy a lesson that can never be forgotten, that freedom is not given but claimed. That peace is not the absence of war, but the presence of justice, and that the smallest act of defiance can change the universe. To all who face oppression, remember, you have the right to say no, and when enough voices join together, no empire can stand against them. The conquest of humanity failed because humans would never accept surrender. The conquest of the spirit fails whenever any being chooses to be free. Beneath the monument, in a garden that bloomed with plants from 100 worlds, children of a dozen species played together. They did not know the old hatreds. They had never known a galaxy divided by conquest. To them, cooperation was simply the way things were. And somewhere, watching from the great beyond, the spirits of those who had made this future possible smiled. Chen Wei, who had spoken truth to power. Kexrath, who had been willing to listen. And billions of humans who had faced extinction without flinching, who had chosen death over surrender and thereby saved not just their world but an entire galaxy. The Vorthan conquest had ended not with a battle, but with a simple word. No. And that word had changed everything.